Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here in a couple of minutes. Probably give it a minute or so to let everybody kind of trickle in. My name is Noah Painter. I am the outreach coordinator for the Sacramento River Parkway Project. I just wanted to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the project webpage. After the meeting is complete, we'll get it uploaded within the next few days. So give it another minute to let everyone get in, and then we'll get the presentation started. Okay. Uh, just be respectful of everyone's time. We'll get started with tonight's presentation. Again, for those of you that have just joined, my name is Noah Painter. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Sacramento River Parkway Project. I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items as we get started this evening. First, thank you all for taking the time this evening for joining us. I know it's right after work, and sometimes not the easiest to engage in public participation for projects like this. So thanks for taking the time for that. We do understand that some have strong opinions about this project, both in support and opposition, but we do ask that everyone remain respectful of staff, of presenters, and of fellow attendees this evening. Again, this meeting's being conducted via Zoom webinar, and it's a webinar format meeting. So the format's designed to ensure that all participants have an opportunity to hear the information clearly. What we do ask is if you have questions, there's a Q&A feature on the webinar. Please submit your questions via that Q&A feature throughout the presentation. So if you see a slide that Megan or James or I or Tim are going through and you have a question, feel free to ask that question at that time, and we'll be able to answer that question once we're ready to go through the Q&A portion of this presentation tonight. If we're unable to answer your question this evening, because either we run out of time, and that has not happened yet, this is the third meeting that we've had for residents in and along the project alignment. Because we either run out of time or we may not be able to answer your question because we don't have the exact answer and we'll have to research it. So the project team will follow up with you specifically to answer your question, either via email or phone, if that case does come up. And with that, I want to do an introduction of who's with us tonight on the project team. First, we have Megan Johnson. Megan is the city's project manager. Megan is an engineer with the City of Sacramento's Department of Public Works, and she's leading the effort for the city on this project. With us tonight is James Pangburn. James is the engineering manager for Wood Rogers. Wood Rogers is the engineering and design firm that is working to lead this effort in coordination with the City of Sacramento. Lastly, we have Tim Chamberlain. Tim is the project manager for Wood Rogers on this project. And last and definitely least is myself, Noah Painter. I am handling the public outreach for this project. With that, I'd like to hand this over to Megan to start the formal presentation.
Wonderful. Thanks, Noah. All right. So again, I would like to reiterate Noah's thanks. We appreciate your attendance tonight to talk about this project. The purpose of this focus meeting is to give updates on the project, but in particular on the selection process for the neighborhood access ramps, as well as to give an overview of the draft safety plan. And so tonight we're going to go through how that draft plan is structured and what information it includes. You're welcome to give initial thoughts tonight, but we'll also provide copies that you can access on the project webpage, and you can review that in depth and follow up with emails with any feedback that you may have. And so our intention will be to finalize that safety plan during the final design phase with consideration of the feedback that we receive from the community. The purpose of these focus meetings is to focus on the specific topics of particular relevance to your neighborhoods, but we're also going to be having a larger public meeting in June that will cover more topics. And so we encourage you to come join us again at that larger meeting. And then you're, of course, also welcome to email us at our project email address with any feedback or questions. Next slide. All right, now I know that many of you are already familiar with the project, but I'm just going to give an overview for anyone who may be new to what we're doing and why we're doing it. So first, just a note about trails. California is blessed with natural resources, and our rivers, beaches, and lakes have been enjoyed by residents and visitors alike since the first people arrived here. Trails along our natural resources improve mental and physical health, connect communities, and they provide recreational and mobility benefits. As California's population increased and urbanization and private development began to cut off these resources, a series of legislative acts were taken in the 1970s to ensure continued public access to our waterways. This included a voter initiative in 1972, which led to the creation of the California Coastal Commission and the Coastal Act, which famously preserved public access to the coast. And then State Assembly Bill 1504 required that new subdivision developments adjacent to the public waterways were to include dedication for public access adjacent to the river or stream. This was then incorporated into the Subdivision Map Act and added to state code. And since then, the notion of public access rights along the coast and along our waterways has become ingrained into Californian consciousness, despite the fact that there are continuing existence of locations that do have private ownership over that land. Next slide. So this is a bit of background on the origins of the Pocket Greenhaven neighborhood and its development. The Pocket area was first settled by Portuguese immigrants in the 1850s as a rural farming community. The population in the Pocket started to increase when the Pocket was annexed into the city in 1959. The early residential developments, which followed in the 1960s, were largely on the north side of Pocket Greenhaven. And then in the mid-70s, with the construction of Interstate 5 and a connection of Pocket Road to Riverside Boulevard, there is more growth and an increase in development in the Pocket neighborhood to the south. As I mentioned, the Subdivision Map Act went into effect in the early 70s, which required developers to dedicate public access next to the river as part of the approvals process for those new subdivisions. So that was an overview of the development of the Pocket. And this is an overview of the development of the Sacramento River Parkway Trail Project. So in the 70s, as the new subdivision developments were including dedications adjacent to the river for public access, the Sacramento River Parkway Master Plan established an official vision for a recreational trail that would connect Freeport in the south all the way up to the confluence with the American River near downtown. As the Pocket continued growing to the south, the Sacramento River Parkway Trail was then included in the Pocket Area Community Plan in 1979. Then not a lot happened for a while until 1997, when an update of the plan accounted for the changing land uses that had occurred since 1975. It confirmed the vision for the Levee Top Trail and approved an environmental impact report. In 2012, Council then adopted an implementation plan for the American and Sacramento River Parkway plans, which identified actions that would lead to a 25-mile interconnected river trail system. So this shows a map from that 2012 implementation plan, which shows the vision for the ultimate interconnected trail system along the Sacramento and American rivers. Along the Sacramento River, following the adoption of the Sacramento River Master Plan in 1975, the city has been chipping away at that vision. The completion of this project will create the largest stretch of continuous waterfront trail along the Sacramento River. In 2015, the city of Sacramento started taking concrete steps towards the implementation of that vision. Our first steps were small, and we attempted to tackle it in short segments using local funds. First, the city started working on a locally funded project between Garcia Bend Park and Pocket Canal. Then in 2017, council gave direction to develop a separate locally funded project between Pocket Canal and Arabella Way. And these efforts made progress. However, as federal and state grant programs began to prioritize significant amount of funding towards bike and pedestrian trails, we saw an opportunity to leverage our local funds to bring in more federal and state funds, which then lets our local funds stretch a lot farther. In 2021, we were awarded federal funds for the environmental clearance, preliminary engineering, and final design of the full stretch in the pocket, and then we kicked off that effort. We did lose some momentum with that change in strategy, but it allows us to have a cohesive planning, engagement, and design effort rather than piecemealing the efforts. So now I'll turn it over to Tim, who will walk us through what's happening with the project.
Thanks, Megan. My name is Tim Chamberlain. I'm the project manager here at Wood Rogers, and we're supporting the city providing engineering and environmental services for the Sacramento River Parkway Project. Over the last 2 years, we've developed a preliminary project design, evaluated potential access points for the trail, coordinated with regulatory agencies, and prepared environmental documents for the project. We're nearing completion of the preliminary design and environmental phase of the project and plan to ask City Council to approve advancing the project to complete a final design and proceed with coordination with private property owners to obtain legal rights to construct and operate the trail. Throughout this process, we have been engaging with the community dating back to early 2023 when we had virtual communities just like this one and a larger scale public meeting at Kennedy High School. The total project limits are from Zacharias Park at the northern end to Garcia Bend Park at the southern end. This exhibit shows the project in 2 segments, segment 1 to the north, segment 2 to the south. And both ends of the trail would connect in with existing sections of the Sacramento River Parkway that have already been constructed. A key part of preliminary design was consideration for how to get pedestrians and cyclists from pocket neighborhoods up to the trail at the top of the levee. A large number of possible access points were originally identified. Next slide. From that larger number, the potential access points were reduced to 9 possible locations not long after our public outreach efforts in 2023 and incorporating feedback from the community. These locations are shown on this slide and were further vetted using a range of evaluation criteria. This included consideration of impacts to private property, right-of-way requirements, earthwork feasibility, impacts to the environment, safety, specifically the ability for residents and law enforcement to view and respond at these locations. And finally, how well these access points would serve the community, providing easy access to the main trail. Also, part of this process was considering how neighborhoods to the east of Riverside Boulevard and Pocket Road would be able to safely cross the major arterial roadway on their way to the levee trail. The red triangles show locations where additional pedestrian activated crossings were considered along Riverside and Pocket Road. Part of our public engagement included a survey requesting feedback about the trail project and the potential access points. Over 1,000 responses were received, and over 90% of respondents are in favor of the project and providing a complete levee trail connection from South Sacramento to downtown, as well as connecting to the American River Bike Trail. Respondents also identified the top preferred access points at Zacharias Park, Sleepy River Way, and North Point Way. Considering the range of evaluation criteria and the response from the public, project team have identified 5 access points which we plan to include in the project at this stage. These are the obvious connections at Zacharias Park, conversion of an existing maintenance access road to ADA accessible access point at North Point Way, a new access point at Audubon Circle, conversion of an informal concrete stair levee access to ADA accessible access point at Country River Way, and conversion of an existing maintenance access road to ADA accessible access point at Sleepy River Way. This, of course, is in addition to the existing access to the trail currently at Garcia Bend Park. I do want to mention Sleepy River Way is a little bit different than the other locations in that it's improvements that are kind of off on an island at the very southern portion of the Pocket neighborhood. This would connect into a portion of the trail that's already been constructed, whereas the other 4 locations would be connecting to portions of the trail that are proposed to be constructed. The project would also include construction of pedestrian activated traffic signals at Ashore Way, River Tree Way, and Sea Lion Court, which would provide enhanced access to the levee trail across Riverside Boulevard and Pocket Road. And with that, I'll pass it back to Megan to give you an update on the progress that we've made preparing a draft safety plan for this project.
Great, thanks, Tim. So when the city kicked off this effort, it was with recognition and understanding that the introduction of a public trail through what's currently a private space was generating concern from residents. And so the project team was tasked with developing a safety plan to promote and maintain public safety. To do this, we assembled an internal safety plan group to identify a plan of viable strategies to promote safety along the parkway. And so this group included representatives from Sacramento Police Department, the Fire Department, the Park Rangers, Parks Department, Public Works, and the city's incident management team, which is responsible for a response to homeless encampments. And so the goal of this initial preliminary work was just to develop a foundational understanding of the roles, enforcement mechanisms, and some initial ideas of implementable strategies as a draft. And now we're going to be working through refining that through input and feedback from the residents and from the community. So this draft plan is ready to be shared, and it's available at the project webpage. So today I'm going to walk you through what's included in the draft safety plan to give you an overview. And you're welcome to provide initial thoughts tonight, and then also to review and email any feedback you have to the project email address. Our intention is to finalize this safety plan as the final design and the right-of-way proceeds. So next page. All right, so the first page that you'll see in the draft safety plan is the introduction and background, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It gives a brief description of the parkway history and the project limits, and it describes that the proposed project will be introducing public access onto levees that are in part on private property, and that the purpose of this safety plan is to identify strategies to promote and maintain public safety. Next page. Okay, so this page is kind of a table of contents of sorts. It describes how the plan is structured. And so the first part of the plan defines the roles and responsibilities of entities contributing to public safety on the trail. The next section identifies the relevant codes, ordinances, and enforcement mechanisms for preventing and enforcing unauthorized activity from the parkway on public and private property. The third part of the plan highlights safety strategies for the parkway that we are proposing to implement with the project design. And then finally, there's a section on optional strategies that homeowners may choose to implement. And the fact that the levee top trail runs through areas on which the surrounding parcel is public property and also areas where it's a public recreation easement on private property is important to the safety plan because the mechanisms for enforcement depend on whether it's private or public property. Okay, so here is that first section, which outlines the entities who will play a part in maintaining the trail safety, which includes the park rangers, Sacramento Police Department, our incident management team, which is that interdepartmental group who responds to homeless encampments, It also includes our Department of Youth, Parks, and Community Enrichment, Public Works, and members of the community. So this next section covers the mechanisms for preventing and removing unauthorized activity from the parkway. And so in the plan, these are structured kind of as fact sheets, and they cover the following information. It gives a description about the safety concern being discussed and whether that enforcement is relevant to private or public property. And it documents the applicable codes or ordinances that allow for enforcement. And then it outlines how to request assistance with information on who can request assistance and how to do so. So first up, this section of the plan is focused on mechanisms to enforce public safety on public property. And so this includes the trail, parks, and the portions where the adjacent parcel is owned by the city. And so the multi-use trail will be designated as parkway, and that will let us put it in the parks category. And that allows for the setting of hours of use and enforcement of any ordinances in the city code that can be enforced by both park rangers and Sac PD. Next slide. So this shows some of the relevant park ordinances, which would also be applicable to the parkway. Hours would be set, restricting use between dusk and dawn, although those after hours restrictions don't apply to people in transit. So like if you are riding your bike to commute up to work or commute home, you'll still be allowed to commute during dark hours, provided that you have appropriate bike lighting. The ordinances also prohibit alcohol, smoking, possession of weapons, littering or dumping, starting or maintaining fires, motorized vehicles, and camping. And then we'll also have park signage that direct users to stay on the trail. For any concerns about people violating these ordinances, here's the info about who and how to report. So who may call for enforcement on public property? Anyone. That includes homeowners, renters, neighbors, or trail users. For non-emergencies, they may submit requests through 311 or the 311 app. For emergencies, call 911, or there's this specific phone number that Sac PD recommends if you are calling by cell phone. Next slide. Okay, so this section of the plan covers mechanisms for enforcement of public safety on private property. Keeping in mind that illegal activity can always be called into 911 and that park ordinances will still apply and be enforceable to the trail itself, these are mechanisms to address specific concerns. First up is camping. So in 2020, City Council adopted the Critical Infrastructure Ordinance, which identifies that levees, which includes the levee prism and a 25-foot offset from the levee, are established as critical infrastructure on which it is unlawful and a public safety concern for any person to camp, occupy camp facilities, use camp paraphernalia, or store personal property. And so who may call for enforcement? Anyone, including residents or trail users. Enforcement can be requested by calling 311 or using the 311 app. Removals may be enforced by the city following a 24-hour notice, but it can also be enforced immediately without prior notice if the violation poses an imminent threat to public health or safety. And actually, I will give a little caveat that critical infrastructure code can apply for both private and public property. Public property is also just covered by the parks ordinances as well. All right, next slide. Pretty much all other nuisance concerns on private property are enforceable through trespass procedures. So this does require that homeowners or residents of the private property file the request for enforcement. And then the safety plan outlines those steps for the trespass procedures that would be followed. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Noah, who's going to walk you through the safety strategies that the project is planning to implement.
Thanks, Megan. A key component of the design of the project is utilizing what's called SEPTED principles when considering the project. This project applies SEPTED, which stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, to really promote safety by design. One of the key principles of SEPTED is natural surveillance. And what that is designing spaces so that users can be easily seen and can see. The access ramps and trail alignments were intentionally designed with clear, open sight lines. Although lighting's not permitted on the levee itself, lighting will be installed at access points and nearby areas to help improve visibility and safety after dark. Another SEPTED principle we're using is activity support. Public spaces become safer when they're actively used by residents, neighbors, and families. A well-used trail deters unwanted activity. When a space is filled with positive activity, it's less likely to attract any negative behavior. And our goal by designing this trail is to create an active space that encourages community presence throughout the day. This is an example of both two access points that were considered during the preliminary access point analysis. One has very good SEPTED characteristics. You can see on the left-hand side, this is Country River Way. It has a clear line of sight from where the trail ends and starts at the street. And there's presence of homes facing the trail that give an impression of eyes on the trail. And then there's a separate diagram here showing another location, which is the sump station. And that location really has obstructed lines of sight from the street and from the trail, and has an active blind spot there right by the sump station itself. So this is just a good example of what is taken into consideration when looking at how you design access points for people to get on and off the trail.
And just to clarify, the sump station location is not one of the recommended locations, in part because of the concern about the lack of good sightlines and SEPTED characteristics.
Thanks, Megan. Additionally, other strategies that are in the safety plan include monitoring. And many of us that live in the Greenhaven Pocket community know that the neighborhood was one of the first neighborhoods, if not the first neighborhood, to have the pods installed by the Sacramento Police Department on major intersections. In coordination and working through this document to develop the draft, feedback that we received from SAC PD was installing pods at access points and nearby trail sections is something that would be recommended and is recommended in the document. These cameras operate on a 24/7 basis, and they're used by SAC PD to help deter crime, assist with any investigations, identify issues, as it relates to stolen vehicles or other unauthorized activity. And really, what they're designed to do is help balance privacy and public safety concerns using technology. Additionally, as part of the 1997 Parkway Plan and subsequent updates, parking was really a focus of trying to steer those folks that are driving to the trail to utilize the trail to get them to park at Garsha Bend Park or at Zacharias Park. The other access points are neighborhood access points, Country River Way, Audubon, North Point, Sleepy River Way. Those are intended to be neighborhood access points for folks that live in the community to access the trail that way. Tools that we're including when it comes to discussing parking restrictions for neighborhood access points include red curbs at the access points to preserve visibility, directional signage to Garsha Bend Park for those that may come upon a neighborhood access point, and then the discussion with neighbors in the community at the neighborhood access points about time-restricted parking or residential parking permits. We do know that North Point Way, currently behind the Elks Lodge, already has restricted parking there, but it's something to take into consideration and have conversations with the community about as this plan moves forward. Additionally, this is kind of an ongoing discussion, so it's something that will be discussed kind of post implementation as well. One thing that we heard as feedback is some people may have used the current trail or have a lot of experience on trails either as a runner, they use it to walk their dog, they might use it for riding their bicycle. And there are some people that this may be their very first time or very few times on a trail and don't have the experience of proper trail etiquette. So signage to allow for proper trail etiquette is critical. Teaching people where and how to walk, what to look out for, how to be respectful, leash rules for your dogs. If you're utilizing an e-bike, some sort of assisted bike, what those guidelines are for speed and so forth, it will go a long way. Another item that we did get feedback on at our public meeting at Kennedy High School was utilization of like a civilian patrol on the trail. The American River Bike Patrol has been something that has been in existence for a number of years and has been very helpful for those folks that are utilizing the trail. The goal here is to replicate that idea along the Sacramento River Parkway Trail and have them serve as essentially trail ambassadors. The program is modeled after the National Ski Patrol program. These people have training in CPR, first aid. It can also assist with basic bike repair. If you get a flat tire, it can help fix your bike if you're unfamiliar with how to do that. They also serve as providing support, reporting issues, and they're visible eyes on the trail. They can act essentially as a conduit to ensure that there is ongoing safety and conversations with SAC PD if that is needed. Lastly, visual cues are something that are important. Portions of the trail will have private property on certain sides of it. And what we want to make sure is that people that are utilizing the trail understand that and respect that. So as part of the discussions, signage about private property will be installed, and those discussions are ongoing. And then really clearly delineating and defining the trail boundary, and doing that utilizing essentially wood bollards to have those installed. That does require coordination with our state partners, both at the Department of Water Resources, who handles and maintains the maintenance. So if you've seen like the tractors that have been up there recently doing some of the landscaping and mowing, that's the Department of Water Resources Maintenance Area 9. And then in addition to that, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, who has the responsibility as a state agency for protecting the levees and ensuring that the levees are in good shape. That's an ongoing conversation. We've been having those, but there is support for the installation of those bollards to ensure that we can delineate between private and public space. Lastly, access for public safety vehicles. All of the access points will be designed to allow for the support of access for public safety vehicles, not only SAC Fire and the utilization for fire trucks and life safety to be able to access and get on the trail, but also the allowance for larger equipment that is needed for flood fighting and flood protection. First and foremost, this levee is here to protect us from floods and to ensure that the floods are managed, our flood control is managed properly. In addition to that, this is a benefit to be able to provide them to get up and down that trail as quickly as they can. One of the other items that we've heard is property owners whose homes abut the trail alignment. There are concerns about proximity and ensuring that they can maintain safety. And it's something that this project team takes seriously and is really thinking, about how we can provide a balance there and address reasonable concerns. Some of the conversations that have happened and discussions around optional strategies for homeowners include supplemental lighting in the backyards and on fencing that will help illuminate areas. And then in addition to that, where permitted and allowed, privacy landscaping to be utilized. And lastly, just purely notifying people that this is public property. Some people might not understand it, and know that. So if there is a sign that lets folks know that, there's no trespassing and it's private property, 9 times out of 10 people do respect those issues. I do want to touch on our project delivery timeline. Like Megan said, and Tim had mentioned, the effort up to this point has really been focused around design and environmental clearance. We're coming to the end of the environmental clearance section with a hope for completion in summer of 2025, so just around the corner. We do have a public meeting scheduled as an open house on June 17th, 2025, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. That's going to be at John F. Kennedy High School at the Performing Arts Center. Those folks, and I know that there was a mention of somebody not getting a notification on this meeting in the Q&A. We'll make sure that those emails go out with anyone who has reached out to us either via email or attended previous meetings. We have an ongoing list for that. And then while these phases continue to progress, we're going to be continuing the outreach that we're doing, working with both our partners internally and also the community now that the draft safety plan is at a point where we can have discussions with folks in the community about it. And then lastly, pursuing the last amounts of federal and state funding we need to be able to move the project forward towards completion. And with that, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to sit through and listen to our presentation. And it looks like we've got a number of questions from our Q&A here that we can go through. And I think what we can do is just kind of go down the list and handle those. I will kick this one off and hand this over to Megan. So, Megan, first question is when the project is underway, will the fencing barriers be removed on the levee?
Okay, yeah, thanks for that question. So right now there are cross levee fences that have been installed on some portions of the trail through permits between the property owner and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And so as part of our project, we will be working to acquire and purchase the rights for the public easement at the top of the levee. And once we've done that, then the project will remove those cross levee fences to open up the trail.
Okay. And then this one's from Cheryl. It says, we've attended a meeting before and had asked to be contacted about future meetings. We weren't contacted about this meeting and just happened to hear about it from our neighbor. Could you please be sure that we're getting meeting invites and contacted about this project by email or USPS? Cheryl, yes, everyone should have received a postcard in the mail with a Zoom link or a specific URL for this meeting. So I apologize that you didn't get that. We can go back and double check and confirm that did get delivered, but we'll make sure that we have your email address now, and we'll make sure that you're getting invites via email as those go out. No emails went out for this one, and really the goal of these meetings is to talk to residents and invite them to learn more about where we are with the project. Whether you're along the trail alignment, so your property is kind of in the neighborhoods that back right up to where the project trail is proposed, or if you're at an access point area, and I think, Cheryl, you're probably in the latter. Sounds like Country River Way is where you're at. So apologize that you didn't get a postcard, but I'm glad you were able to join this one. Question here, the stairway has been gone from Country River Way for years. What do you mean conversion? I think that was probably Tim.
I can take that one. Yeah. So yeah, this is 100% correct. I think the concrete stairs were removed in the late 2010s. The reason we said it that way in the presentation is that this was historically a place where there was access from roadside up to top of levee or over to the river. I will say that fact wasn't a huge component. It was a minor element in the decision making for putting the access point at Country River Way. More of that decision really had to do with the infeasibility of two other locations that were looked at on the north side and south side of the Pocket Canal itself, which at one time, about a year and a half ago, we were really optimistic about the possibility of putting the access point in there, but then for a variety of other reasons, it ultimately was determined to be no longer feasible. So I will say the fact that there was connection historically at Country River Way was a small component, but there were quite a few other elements that went into the decision to ultimately choose that location.
Next question is we also use the email you just provided to inquire about the meeting once we heard about it and received no response. How are you ensuring you review and respond to feedback when we don't get a response about the meeting inquiry? Cheryl, I'll take responsibility for that one. I'm responsible for maintaining that email account, so I will take a look and double check if you sent us an email. But we do make sure that we respond to everybody within 2 business days. That's kind of our standard practice on these. But usually we're able to respond that day. So apologize about that, but we definitely will get back to you. Again, Cheryl's question, just this morning I called the city about a vehicle illegally parking overnight in a 6 p.m., 6 a.m. no parking without permit area on our street, Country River Way. City responded and said that response time to look into this is 6 to 8 weeks. How is this at all acceptable for ensuring safety for our neighborhood now, let alone when you're looking to encourage more activity with the levee access to this parkway trail?
So, yeah, this is something, obviously, it's a little hard to respond about the specific concern without any background on it, but I do understand your concern. And that's something that when we continue to meet with our internal team, we can talk about issues like this on what we can do for responsiveness.
I think this is just a follow-up statement. Clear reinforcement of ordinances and codes just not happening. Okay. An anonymous attendee with homes along the Garcia Bend Trail, have there been problems for residents that have been identified or reported? This is a good question, and it's something that we took into consideration and worked closely with SAC PD, the impact team, and also 311 to take a look at calls for service from the paved portion of the trail. So south from Garcia Bend south to the water tower. We looked at calls for service, 2311 about homeless camps, and all the associated codes that have to deal with folks that are homeless, as well as looking at any fire calls for fires that may have been set, as well as SAC PD's response calls down there, and then compared that to the unpaved section north of Garcia Bend to Zacharias Park. And the calls for service for all three of the providers there, SAC PD, SAC Fire, and 311, show that there are higher call volumes for the unpaved section. Now, arguably, it is a longer stretch of paved section, but there is a considerable amount in some cases of higher call volumes. So, feedback that we've received and what has been said, pretty frequently is, with more eyes on a trail, with more people actively engaged in utilizing a trail, there's less frequency for behavior that would necessitate those types of calls. When is the project scheduled to be completed?
I can handle this one, and I think I'll also grab the next one as well, which says, what is the timeline for the start of the Parkway project and completion? At this time, our goal is to advance into final design and work with local property owners to obtain legal rights to construct and then maintain the trail starting this summer. And we're hoping to have that all completed by the end of 2026. After that, it would essentially roll it right into construction. And we are anticipating construction would take about 12 months if the entire trail segment is constructed all at once. It's worth mentioning the city currently has full funding to complete final design and right-of-way for the entire segment of trail, but at the moment we only have enough construction funding to do segment one, which is at the southern end of the project, from starting at Garcia Bend Park up to Arabella Way. So in the meantime, while we're working through final design and right of way, the city is going to be pursuing additional grant funding, and hopefully we'll be able to construct both segments of the project together. But just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that in terms of the overall project delivery.
Next one is the laws quoted state no camping and the 25-foot levee offset. However, the new beaches are much farther out than 25 feet. How will residents be protected in these areas? Not sure I follow that question.
This may be a difference sort of in the way we look at the levees. There's sort of the levee that you can see when you're standing on the street, sort of on the land side. And then there's something from an engineering standpoint that's called the theoretical levee prism. And it's essentially a big trapezoid that it continues down even beyond the sort of ground level on the land side, and then goes way down into the bottom of the river. And that entire structural section of the levee is all part of what's being protected by this type of regulation for critical infrastructure. So I believe in this case, the statement about 25 feet from the levee is actually 25 feet offset from the extent of the full structure of the levee. And so it should cover areas above water all the way to the Sacramento River.
Next question, follow up on the beaches. The beaches along the levee have long areas that do not comply with natural surveillance. People there cannot be seen without being on top of the levee. How are we planning to address this?
So, very good questions, Tammy. For the most part, along the Sacramento River, it doesn't have as many kind of flat areas as, say, like the American River Parkway does. Where there are locations that do have, some spots that are not as well, don't have as clear sight lines. In terms of like mechanisms for restricting usage, one of the things that we'll be considering is establishing some of the slope areas and the areas adjacent to the water as riparian habitat, which is a mechanism for enforcing, not having people down there. When it comes to seeing them, it is tough if you can't see them and you don't know them that they're there. It's tough to report it. Valid.
Next question is how will parking and hours enforcement take place at locations that are not designated official access points? For example, Port Nail Circle is currently experiencing parking issues with cars blocking driveways, ADA access to sidewalks, and violating the park hours. I'll tackle this one. So this is definitely something that you would want to reach out to council member's office and reach out to Dennis Rogers and have a conversation with him, as well as reach out to Captain Shadashi with SAC PD, because really this is an enforcement issue. If there are people that are blocking ADA access on sidewalks, working with city staff to have parking enforcement come out and educate and issue citations is important. It's something that will be, it's incumbent upon you as the property owners and residents to do this. I grew up in the neighborhood right off of Havenside and knew if somebody was parking, in the park after hours, and it was something that was concerning, you'd make a phone call and ask for somebody to come out and address that, using the non-emergency police line. So if this is an ongoing issue, JP, My advice to address what's there now, since the trail's not there yet, um, is to talk to the council member's office as well as talk to SAC PD about trying to get some enforcement and education out there. With that being said, uh, official and unofficial access points, once the trail is constructed, there's a goal to ensure that folks are educated about where to go, and having proper signage to let them know that this is not an access point, for folks that are driving in and parking, as well as, the opportunities to have conversations with residents about some sort of parking program or parking restrictions. Uh, Tammy's follow-up question, what are the new laws regarding building fires on the river side of the levee? The fires are a huge risk to homes and the smoke and health issues. I'm happy to answer this one. Tammy, there's no fires allowed on the river. That's something that is definitely a concerning issue and should not happen. And if does, SAC PD should be called immediately to ensure that that SAC fire gets dispatched. Marcia Jepson, there's already significant safety issues on the current levee path. What are your plans for now? The safety problems include fires, motorized vehicles, including motorcycles in groups of 6, dumping of trash, destroying a recent beaver fence by fences by all-day fishermen, smoking, drinking, all-day parking, and using the levee for a latrine. Okay. The data that we have and what we've been able to have conversations with our partners in SAC at SAC PD and SAC Fire and 311 show that there have been incidents, along the trail. But again, the volume and the calls for service along the paved section have not shown to be more than what is currently taking place on the unpaved section. I've anecdotally on Nextdoor heard, about motorized motorcycles and folks taking, 6 or 7 people going down the trail. I've also heard, of it on the canal as well, and did encounter it once when I was walking my daughter, which was a little frustrating. That kind of behavior needs to be stopped. It's not allowed on any portion of the trail, and it's not allowed in any of the parks in the city. So it's definitely an enforcement issue and something that needs to be addressed and dealt with.
And tacking on to that, in discussions with our safety partners, SAC PD, park rangers, the IMT, as you note, and as they note, there are currently issues that happen out there now. Right now, if people want to get back to where there's no trail and do illicit activity, they're able to do so. But in talking with SAC PD and the IMT, they feel that opening up the trail and activating the space makes it less attractive for people to do bad behavior, because there's a higher chance that they will be observed while they're doing it. So they do not anticipate seeing an uptick in any unwanted behavior with the trail.
The next question is from Mary. Mary said, so the ramp on Country River Way will be big enough for fire trucks and flood control equipment, not just bikes and pedestrians? Why, when there is already access points a half mile on either side of Country River Way?
So just to kind of clarify for this, they're not going to be designed for like massive equipment. They're with the design for your standard bike and pedestrian ramp. There's sufficient width for a police vehicle, for a like moderate sized vehicle to make its way up when needed. So in talking with SAC PD, their position is the more options they have for accessing the trail when they need it, it's a benefit for public safety. But they're not going to be massive ramps. They'll be normal kind of bike and pedestrian sized ramps.
Tammy, we have a lot of problems with the public on both the riverside and street side. Very disruptive and not safe. Thank you for advising parking restrictions may be allowed. How do we go about considering implementation of these? So, Tammy, for an immediate conversation around parking restrictions, it would be reaching out to Councilmember Jennings' office, having a conversation with them, and asking for the parking division of the City of Sacramento Department of Public Works to get involved to talk about whether or not your neighbors and you would be interested in a residential parking program of some sort. But that would be the initial step to start this, is to reaching out to Councilmember Jennings' staff. Just, what is the most realistic estimate when the fences will be taken down? I think, Tim, you've covered that on your
I
project.
think I think so. Probably, like I said, our goal is to have the project in construction by the end of 2026, about a 12-month schedule. So we'd be looking at kind of end of 27, beginning of 28 for having the trail open to the public.
An anonymous attendee said, we already have an unbroken trail connecting 35th and Riverside to Garcia Bend Park. Why do we need a second trail considering the tight Sacramento budget? Megan, you want to try this one?
Yeah, so this kind of goes to the, I think, well understood public benefit that comes from access to our natural resources. I think it's widely considered that the American River Parkway is, I think it's called the crown jewel of Sacramento, and that it is a tremendous asset to Sacramento's residents. And so the Sacramento River has the potential to be equally beneficial to the larger community. And so it's with aspiration of fully utilizing the resources that we have.
And I think just one thing to clarify on the funding side, projects like these and many of the projects that the city embarks in terms of public works and capital projects are primarily funded with state and federal funding, not our local tax dollars in terms of general fund dollars. So, when we talk about how these projects are kind of put together, Megan is a master at being able to figure out how to cobble together all these funding sources to create new active transportation and bike trails, and with minimal impact on any budget issues directly affecting Sacramento budget that would compete with parks, police, fire, etc.
Good clarification. Thank you.
Tammy's comment, many have made calls for service, but have to be wary about property values. Okay, that's noted. Regarding the Country River Way access, prior public access has had severe adverse impacts on local residents, including trespassing, human waste, camping, burglary, and assault.
I think really the best response to this question is that this really is the whole reason why we've prepared the safety plan for this project. It is the city's best attempt at coming up with a comprehensive plan to deal with this type of difficult situations that property owners sometimes have to deal with. Whether or not the trail is there, like you mentioned, these types of things do happen, and so I kind of see this potentially as a benefit to residents to be able to take advantage of a more comprehensive safety plan that can handle those actions that are happening on the levee, irrespective of construction of this project.
Next question is what other access points have been reviewed, i.e. property north of the Waldorf School? I'll take a stab at that and probably kick it over to you, Tim. The design team looked at multiple potential access points as at the initial steps of trying to identify where to locate these, and it's primarily utilizing data to try to figure out what are called capture areas. Capture areas are ensuring that people have the ability to access these access points, no pun intended. And ultimately, those were then narrowed down to the recommendations that you saw in the presentation earlier. And then subsequently, a community survey went out and was asked the community for feedback on access points and which ones they would rank and how they would use them. And the overlap between the kind of engineering analysis and the feedback that the community provided was a pretty good reassurance that the selected locations were a good fit.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. I'll also mention that sometimes in specific access point locations where we did originally consider them, and I think that property that you mentioned north of the Waldorf School was one of those. Some of them were ruled out from a feasibility standpoint, or because they had sensitive environmental resources that really needed to be avoiding. We needed to avoid impacting them as a result of this project. So there are certain considerations. Some of those locations were ruled out because they would affect local property owners in a more meaningful and significant way. Some were ruled out to avoid adverse environmental impacts. Some were just not feasible from an ADA accessibility standpoint. So a lot of the initial ones that we ruled out were sort of from more of these obvious sort of deal breaker red flag type situations early on. Then we got down to the 9 that we considered more strongly, and then from there we're able to narrow it down to the 5, taking into the considerations that Noah mentioned a moment ago.
Next question's from Mary. How can I, as a resident, my second-story master bedroom window facing the new ramp, be the city's eyes on the trail when I'm sleeping? I'll have to install dark shades and keep my windows shut and AC on just so I can sleep. So this argument is not a good one for those of us directly impacted by this design. Please explain.
So just to clarify, it's less that we're anticipating that residents actively look out their window to surveil. It's more the feeling that people have that they may be observed. So, with your windows there, without you even being there, I think people, when they see windows facing them, they're aware that someone could be seeing them right now. And so it's just the perception that people who are using the ramp are being seen rather than the actual act of somebody surveilling them. And there's also the visibility from the street and from the trail as well.
Next question is why not wait until you have funding for the whole thing? And I'm going to probably add a little bit here. I assume you're talking about the remaining segment of the trail in the little pocket.
Probably more related to my statement earlier about we have funding for segment 1, but not for segment 2, I would guess. The most intuitive answer here is that a lot of these grants that the city receives for these types of projects have expiration dates. And so when we receive a grant, there's an expectation that we will make milestone advancements, finish the environmental phase within a certain amount of time, finish final design and right-of-way acquisition if any is needed, and then construct the project by, usually it's a pretty long horizon year, but it's the sort of thing that we can't just hold on to the money forever. And if we don't use it, then it'll end up getting obligated and moved to a different project that's ready to start construction right away. So go ahead, Megan.
Readiness is one of the big things that granting agencies look for. And so agencies often start the design so that they can demonstrate that there is a project there. You get your environmental clearance done, you work on the design, and then you line up the funding as you go through the process.
Next question is can the property owners along the levee present a legal challenge that may block or limit the project? They have been quite vocal.
So I think for this, I would prefer to not speculate on what people may or may not do. You know, our intention is there's a well-defined process for working through the environmental clearance and the right-of-way and the construction of these projects. So our intention is to follow the process and work with the property owners in good faith.
And just to briefly add to that, it's worth going back and looking at the plan all the way back to 1975. This is not a project that was developed a few years back and is a new idea. We're now implementing one of the last gaps in implementation of a full trail project. So I think that's worth considering at this stage as well.
Rick says he would like to see the south portion paved soon. It's very dusty after levee construction and used to be paved on top of the levee. Okay. With existing lax enforcement, why push for access point neighborhoods rather than existing access points in parks such as Garcia Bend? Megan, probably a good question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer is kind of twofold, and honestly, one of them is more important than the other. So the lesser important one is that when the master plan was established in 1975 and updated throughout, it was identified that the trail should be served by intermediate neighborhood access points at certain intervals is kind of just the guiding principle. But the more important part of that is that we're building the trail for the pocket residents and neighborhoods. And so there needs to be convenient ways for people to get up to the trail and ADA compliant ways so that whether it's someone with a stroller or wheelchair, that there's just access for the people who live there to get up to the trail.
Next question's from Mary. Mary says, the problem isn't policies and laws, it's enforcement. An example is parking enforcement quits working at 5 or 6 o'clock, so they cannot be called to ticket cars parked illegally, such there as after dark. Example, people building campfires on levees are not life and death emergencies, so police frequently do not arrive until hours later, if at all, after party departed because they're busy elsewhere. We have grave concerns about this increasing tenfold in the future. Mary, I know regarding, parking issues, it's something that you have to be vigilant about, regardless of if there's an access point there or not. If somebody's doing something illegal or if there's an issue, it's just the continuation and having, a good neighborhood network, to ensure that things are being managed and taken care of in the neighborhood. Ultimately, calling the non-emergency number and then maybe having some of your neighbors do it as well, can ensure that a response happens. Understand the concern about enforcement and do understand and sympathize that there's times where, something might seem like it's definitely needs enforcement and it may not happen right away. But ultimately, calling SAC PD, whether there's an access point or there's a trail, if somebody's building a campfire or if somebody's illegally parked and doing something that they shouldn't be doing, that's really the path, and making sure that there's, proper connections with local law enforcement. D. Nielsen, will rangers be available to patrol this new park daily? The Sacramento Park Rangers have been part of the conversations and the design of the safety plan that's been developed. Working with them, they do have coverage throughout all the parks in the city of Sacramento. And in speaking with them at our previous meetings, they have mentioned that they do have coverage for the entire city of Sacramento to be able to meet that. So the way that typically it works with the park rangers is park rangers are active and patrolling during the daytime. And then in the evening, a lot of the public safety responsibility in the parks turns over to SAC PD. This is not a question, but a comment. I live adjacent to Country River Way. Thank you for listening and putting this access back. I'm super supportive. Thank you again. And the safety plan is effective. Anonymous attendee said a safety plan is useless if there's no enforcement of the plan and violations of law and code. We agree. If there isn't proper enforcement of the plan and the existing laws on the books, really the safety plan is basically taken and more put together, taken and consolidated a lot of existing laws that already exist under city code and state law and put them into a single document. Enforcement's critical.
But that's why we're also looking for passive mechanisms to, to deter unwanted activity. And so things like putting in the wood posts to just visually, delineate where people should be and where they shouldn't be, designing the ramps in a way that people are visible. We're looking for opportunities where we could design it in a way that at least decreases the opportunity for people to do poor behavior, and then activating the trail so that people don't feel like they can do bad behavior unobserved.
Richard asks, will trash cans be placed along the trail and regular trash pickup be done by city crews?
We definitely have plans to include trash receptacles at the access points, as well as along the trail. I think there also likely will be things to help people who forget their dog poop bags. We've heard from other comments that that's a problem on other portions of the trail, and it's something that's pretty easy to help people remedy. So yeah, we don't have it exactly figured out how far apart the spacing will be, nor how often they will be cleaned out. That's going to be something we work with city maintenance crews and the parks department to figure out, but there is definitely plans to incorporate that.
Marcia's comment is the challenge is how you think people will use access points and how people will actually attempt to access. It would be helpful to have more than call various office, which we have done for over 5 years. But we seem to know that fire is dangerous, yet hearing the fire department tell us they can't make people put fires out is problematic. Okay. You're not addressing all the questions or comments about lax enforcement, so please do so. Anonymous attendee, I think we've covered all of them, but please feel free to re-ask a question if we didn't get to it. Another from anonymous attendee, can we have a park ranger stationed in the Pocket Greenhaven 24/7? The park rangers don't work 24/7. They work during normal shifts during the day. And as mentioned, SAC PD picks up the responsibilities for safety in our parks after the park rangers go off service. We called last week and we heard the fire department advise the resident who called that the fire department couldn't tell rivergoers to put out a fire because they may need the fire to stay warm. The fire department has also told me that fires can be built on the other side of the levee and they can't enforce the riverside. Do you have any feedback about this? Perhaps we in the fire department could better educate, educated on the laws for the fires on the levee and the river. Thank you.
Yeah, Tammy, thank you for the context there with the discussions that you've had. As we continue to talk with our partners, we'll bring that up and discuss it.
And then last questions from Mary. We think that safety elements need to be implemented now, such as parking restrictions, cameras, before ramps are built to prove that they work. And then anonymous attendee, plans for public restrooms, question mark.
There will not be public restrooms constructed with this project. The plan for the public restrooms is at the major access points. So that's Garsha Bend, and I believe Zacharias Park.
Yeah, Zacharias doesn't have a restroom.
Okay. Garsha Bend.
Yeah, Garsha Bend's the main. So Mary said, we think that the safety elements need to be implemented now, such as parking restrictions to prove they work. Mary, we heard you on that. And I think that the challenge with implementing safety elements for this project is a lot of those are capital improvements that are part of the grant funding and capital project. And to be able to do so would go along with the improvements of the project.
Yeah, typically we don't get access to our grant funding until we have certified that we have final plans and we're ready to advertise it.
I will say getting this feedback from everyone who provided comments today definitely makes a difference. We as a team now can go and talk to the other departments at the city who really have been a part of developing the safety plan, as well as the council members, office members who've been coordinating with us, sort of pass on this feedback from you guys and sort of look at ways that we can try and help facilitate some of these changes potentially even sooner than construction of the trail. I don't think that, we've sort of been trying to reiterate this idea that, our job for this project is, getting the trail to a point where we can have it designed, have the legal rights to construct it, and then implement construction. A lot of the concerns are on the enforcement of existing laws, whether there's a trail there or not. And so these two parts go hand in hand. It's both of them are important. And I think taking all this feedback in is definitely valuable for us to provide to those other agencies that are more in the responsibility of providing that enforcement.
A couple more comments came in. Comment from Dean Nielsen. A group of 6 local bikers stopped using the American River Trail due to multiple hostile, unhomed interactions, even when carrying mace, and were forced to use the spray against a hostile human on the trail on multiple occasions when they were blocked and forced to stop their bikes. Pocket area residents will expect better. That group and I and many residents would not consider the American River Parkway to be anywhere close to a crown jewel. It's indeed dangerous area and is now being extended to our neighborhood. The city needs to consider a massive increase in enforcement. Also note that people fish all day in the pocket and use the river as a latrine right across from the river. Okay. Next question is an anonymous attendee. Seems like your plans should include specific funding for enforcement. So a lot of the feedback we're getting is that as part of the safety plan and as part of kind of the overall project, enforcement should be considered, as a discussion item. So,
And just as a kind of note, there are limitations to what engineering staff can include in a plan. But we are going to be, things like resources, enforcement, that's something that City Council will weigh in. And so these discussions, these comments that we're receiving, we'll discuss this with city leadership and pass the desire along.
Then comment only, please get the fences down, and that's coming in from Mark. So noted, Mark. Thank you. That ends our questions for this evening. Have happy to answer any more if anyone has a question that they may have not been able to get in, or something's just coming to mind.
We want to encourage everyone to take a look at the safety plan. It's posted on the city's website, and you have an opportunity to provide additional comments in writing via the email address shown on the slide here. As well as if you think of things that you want to talk about with us further, or other ideas for how we can improve things, please do join us on June 17th at the public workshop for this project, round number 2 from 2023. We really value your input, and we're really working hard to try and incorporate that and make a great project for the city.
And for those that weren't able to, let's see, anonymous attendee, been waiting since 1985 to see some progress on the trail. We're working on it. This is again being recorded, so for those that couldn't make this meeting, your neighbors and so forth, please do have them check out the project webpage. Give us a couple of days to get this uploaded. So sometime next week, it'll be up there, and they can review this meeting and all of the questions as well. I want to take a second to just thank everybody for taking the time. I know spending an hour and a half almost on your Thursday night is not always fun, and that folks do have opinions and concerns about this project, and our commitment from the project team is to make sure that we can address every reasonable concern that is brought up, and we have the ability to address those. So thank you for taking the time again. We've got, let's see, a couple questions. No funding on access points until fences are down. Okay, thanks, Mary. And then when are you uploading the minutes from the 3/11/25 meeting? We will do that. That should have been uploaded already. If it's not up there, we'll make sure that the Country Riverway meeting that we had, we'll get those meeting minutes up there. So, okay, everyone, thank you again for taking the time this evening, and I hope we see you on June 17th.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a great evening.